In this video, we're going to take a look at the construction related dimensions. So we're going to look at projects, cost codes, and cost types in that order. So for your projects, let's take a look at Ascot Gems first, which would be a typical setup for a project. So I have this in the system. I'm going to click edit just to bring up the fields that are already filled in. Anything with a red asterisk is required. So project ID, a typical structure that we would see for IDs is the year and then a 3-digit number. You can set up in Intacct to auto sequence project ID, but 99% of our clients are not going to want to do that. They want to put that in themselves and keep their project ID consistent with project contract ID and estimate ID. You will need to put in a project name and project category. These are out of the box. You can do contract, capitalized, internal non-billable, or internal billable. Contract is the most commonly used. You may, for your specific purposes, do an internal billable or non-billable. Project types, there are certain ones that come out of the box. This is the standard list that you get. You can add more. You can add them on the fly here if you need, and that's really going to depend on what you need for your project types. In description, we recommend that people put the project address in here because there actually is no field for project address on the project setup screen, and this description can be easily accessed through document templates. So we recommend that you put the description or the address in here to the description. You are going to want to make sure that you have a customer associated with each project. It's very important that you have that for billing purposes. So definitely do get that in there. And then begin date and end date are also important. If you're posting to GL budgets, it's going to run off of this begin date sometimes. So you want to make sure you have that in. There is a parent-child relationship across different dimensions in Intacct, and we will see an example of this in our next scenario. There's project status, and then there's status. This is just a static status. It's either going to be active or inactive. Active is going to pull onto a report, and inactive will not pull onto reports. So project status then is a way for you to put controls in place depending on the status of a project. So you get ones that come out of the box. You can add more here if you want to. So let's say if a job is completed, you would want to put controls in place so that people cannot code any more time or expense to that project, but you may want to still be able to send an invoice out, let's say your final bill for retainage. So they're the different project statuses, and you can add them, and they are just for extra controls to be put in place. This include project and WIP schedules. You can't actually check it from here. There is a WIP management section within projects that you can add projects to your WIP schedule. And then once it's added in that section, you'll see this get checked off here. So here in your dimensions, then you have location, department, and class. Class we don't see used a lot, but location and department would be very commonly used for, well, you have no choice but to use location. So yes, you're definitely going to use location. And then departments are commonly used within construction. So you do have to have a location associated with your project. It does not have a red asterisk, but you do need to make sure that you put that in there. And then department. So in this particular setup, we have, our location is Timberline Development, which is my entity level, which I'm at. And then my department is construction operations. You can put in contacts here. It's not required. And then for your people, you can have project manager, external user, customer, sales contact. I have just put in a project manager here. And then I have seen several times where people set up a custom field here for the estimator, which they'd like to apply to a project as well. Scope and schedule you can fill in if you like. And then on the additional info tab, we like to see people put in their terms for their projects, the billing type, whatever that is, and then default your expenses as billable. So when you put in transactions against this project, it automatically marks them off as billable if you have these checked. And then you can put in your contractor amount here, but it is actually not required. So there are the two main tabs where you would be putting in information, and this is just like a standard project setup. So that's the first scenario. Then in our second scenario, we have our main job of fuchsia yards, so our parent job of fuchsia yards. And then we have 3 different phases associated with that project. So if I look at my setup for my phase 1, it is associated with the parent project of Fuchsia Yards. But all 3 phases in this case are associated with the same location and the same department, which is totally fine. And I actually have the same project manager assigned to each one of these phases as well. So my phase 1 is active, and phase 2 and phase 3, I'm still waiting the PO for those, but I do want to still have them in the system. So I can track costs on each one of these phases individually, but then they can also roll up into my parent job, Fuchsia Yards. So sub jobs, or I believe they're called extras in 300, is like your child jobs. It's the equivalent of child jobs in Intacct. And then another scenario is I have Setanta Towers and I have different departments that I have associated with this project. So each one of those will have to be broken out. So let's say for my Setanta Towers electrical, if I look at that, it's associated with my parent project, Setanta Towers, but it is going to be associated with my electrical department. And if I look at my mechanical, it's going to be parent project, Setanta Towers, but it's associated with my department of mechanical. So if you need to break out jobs by specific department, you want to track the billing that way, then you'll need to have sub jobs, child jobs, extras set up for that. Okay, so that is projects in a nutshell. And the next thing that we will look at is cost codes. So if I go to projects, setup, standard cost code catalog, I'll see I just have 97 cost codes in the system at the minute. And this is following the CSI master format for cost codes, which is 010000, and I have my parent cost code of general requirements, and then I have child cost codes underneath that division, which are 011000, and so on and so forth. And most people will be familiar with cost codes. They'll already have a standard list that they are familiar with using, and you can just bring in that list as it is. We may tweak it a little bit or just keep it exactly the same depending on, what you want. But cost codes essentially are a way to break down your costs associated with each project. So you can follow the CSI standard, the CSI master list. There's 50 different divisions on that list, and it makes up thousands and thousands of cost codes on that list. So you could pull from that. Maybe you have your own. Maybe you're a subcontractor and yours are very specific to your business. In that case, that's totally fine. You would come up with your numbering structure and your name, and we would help you with getting those set up. If you've never used cost codes before and you need help with how you're going to set them up, that's totally fine. You can send your chart of accounts over and we can pull out what looks like would be a cost code for you going forward. So your cost codes then are going to get associated with your projects. You have to have cost codes associated with projects in Intacct. So let's say on my Ascot Gems, if I look at the cost codes that are assigned to that project, I think I brought in not all of them, but nearly all of my cost codes for this project. So that's, let's say if I was a general contractor, I would bring in, my concrete, my drywall, masonry, metals, etc. And then if I was splitting it out by department for my Setanta Towers electrical, as an example, I would be pulling in all of my electrical cost codes because that's the specific department and they're the costs that I want associated with that project. So let's say you're a subcontractor and you do concrete and masonry. This 805 7th Avenue would be an example of that. And the cost codes that I'm going to pull in are, my concrete and masonry work. I'm pulling them in for every project. So you might have your standard list that you pull into every single project, and that's totally fine. So you do need to have your cost codes associated with your projects to bill against. And then each cost code is going to have cost types associated with it. So I'm going to take a look at our standard cost type catalog, and these ones come out of the box. So equipment, labor, material, overhead, other, and subcontract come out of the box, and 90% of our clients are happy to use these. You may have a bigger list of standard cost types, which is totally fine. You know what costs you want to track. So that's absolutely fine. A good example of how to set these up is the ID material, name material, the accumulation type is material. In Intacct, we use item to link to the GL account. So that's going to be materials. And then the GL account associated with the cost type is going to be your cost of sales materials. And that's going to look the same. Then if it's labor, it's going to be labor, 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 cost of sales, labor. So you probably be used to your cost type is associated with the GL account. And that's how, when you do your coding, it links to that. But in Intacct, we use item and we configure your transaction definitions to pull in the item to get to the GL account. So it's really important to have that lined up. Basically, you have your projects, your cost codes are assigned to your project to break down that cost. And then within your cost codes, you have cost types to further break down those costs. So it's all really in an effort to get your reporting as granular as possible. So let's go back now to our projects and we'll take a look at, actually, I'm going to go into my standard cost code list and let's just take a look at demo, for example. So I would have multiple cost types associated with my demo cost code. So I want to track equipment, labor, materials, subcontract, all on my demolition cost code. So I could have any one of these cost types associated with that cost code. So however you want to break down those cost codes, you're going to assign those cost types according to that. And then on your parent cost codes, you're not going to want to assign a cost type because you don't want to be billing to your parent cost code. So I'm going to leave the cost types blank on my parent cost codes. So that's your projects, cost codes, cost types, different scenarios for if you need to set up your projects differently. There are import templates to bring in this information, which we will help you with. We'll help you pulling in that information from your legacy system. But for sure, you want to be thinking about on your project side, how you want to break down those projects if you need them by specific departments, or if it's sub jobs or extras and you need to have your child jobs, or if it's just a standard project and you're setting it up with one location, one department. So all things to be thinking about, but that is your construction related dimensions. Thank you very much. And I hope that all made sense.